Hello, greetings and welcome, my dear listeners. My name is Heretical Hatter, and today we'll be talking about the fourth sphere of expansion of T'au Coalition. Before we begin, I would like to apologize for my voice. I got quite sick and was sick for an entire week. I am a bit weak as I'm recording this video, but as I want you to get a video every week, I decided to record it either way. So if I will sound like a dead cat from time to time, I'm very sorry, I'm still getting better. As usual, I would be very happy if you liked, subscribe, or simply left a comment under this video. If you have any questions or suggestions, I would be happy to hear them out. Now, with my mumbling out of the way, please, my dear listeners, sit back, relax, get something hot to drink, or a snack, or both if you like, and let's begin the story of a fourth sphere of expansion. The fourth sphere of expansion lasted from 679 M40 to 45th year of Millennium 41, or from T'au calendar 5855th to 6303 year of Era of Unity. Compared to previous expansion, it was rather short, for it only lasted 366 Terran years, or 448 Tau years. But this expansion proven to be extremely efficient compared to the previous ones. Space around the border of the coalition were all scouted, as well as some Xeno races that were either under observation or with contact with the coalition for some time already were easy to be added to the growing coalition. Vast majority of those Xenos would join the coalition without question. Some races, however, proven to be dangerous or even outright hostile, especially as the coalition was getting closer and closer to the barrier of the warp storms surrounding entire sector. Some species that coalition already encountered, like some type of beastsmen and mutants and humans, were either convinced or forced to join the coalition by military means in a small-scale conflicts, which intentionally weren't recognized as wars for the sake of propaganda and narrative of a greater good. Let's talk about the first major species that the coalition encountered, and one that would prove very important for the coalition's future. I am of course talking about the bug boys, the Vespid, from a gas giant that has the very same name. The Vespid are fascinating creatures. They evolved on a gas giant, of all places in the galaxy. And even more, they aren't a carbon-based life form, but a silicon-based life form. As you probably could guess, I decided to bring some changes to the Vespid from these starting statements alone, because the idea of a species that evolved in one of the most, if not the most hostile environment that can be imagined, a gas giant, should be quite alien compared to any other we heard before. So, what is so interesting about the Vespid? Well, for example, is that they are a semi-hive mind species, as they communicate through a strange energy pulses which, for some reasons, do make small echoes in the warp. They aren't psychic species, how people understand it, but use some kind of semi-reality to facilitate a semi-hive-minded communication between them. They do have a soul and use psychic-like abilities, but they aren't clearly psychers, an anomalous species by understanding of majority of species in the galaxy. Not surprising, seeing that they evolved on a freaking gas giant. As far as any member of the Coalition, or even the Imperium, the Vespid are entirely unique in this matter. There is no other species in the galaxy that communicate or even possesses clear access to this strange type of energy that they are using. Vespid resemble insects to a point, but are far from something we could call an insectoid species, as their biology is totally different. They can feed on solid, like rock or crystal matter, but they also have ability to process certain type of gases. For example, vast majority of species in the galaxy need oxygen to breathe. The Vespid can utilize almost any gas to breathe. Again, maybe it's connected to their, thing that they evolved on a gas giant, and depending on the height or altitude in the gas giant, the gases changed. And they have ability to breathe all of them without much problem. And while they look like insects, they are genetically further from insects than insects are from fungus. Something which isn't fully understood is ludicrous ability to adapt to almost any environment that the Vespid possess. It's hard to find a type of atmosphere they can't live in. Their advanced air circulation system being a main reason for it, as they can use other elements than oxygen to power their organs, what I spoke about before. Vespid are also incredibly strong. As we all know, gas giants have ludicrously strong gravity, and Vespid strength show it well, as they are able to fly with terrifying speed in almost any environment, and it's hard to find a species that can challenge them in terms of speed or strength or even toughness. By some accounts, Vespid might possess the greatest mass to strength ratio of all species in the galaxy. They are strong enough to match to even space marines in terms of speed and physical strength in certain environments. By all accounts, despite persistence of numerous strange species in the Coalition, the Vespid is the closest one that matches or even exceeds Astartes in many ways. Even an armor of a space marine can be damaged by the Vespid claws. The power of the Vespid made some believe they were designed by some higher power or greater civilization. But there is no proof of that anywhere. All current research points that It was the cruel environment of their homeworld that made them into beings they are now. Initial contact with the Coalition was rough, as the very first contact with other species Vespid experienced were the orcs, who decided that to attack their gas giant and destroy one of their major cities on their way down to the core was a good idea. The orcs were of course crushed by the gravity of the gas giant, but they did manage to smack entire city on their way down. Additionally, because of their weird way of communicating and semi-hive mind collective understanding and communication, they didn't recognize other species as truly sentient. They saw them, but there was no connection. They just didn't saw them as something truly living. This made them rather hostile to all other forms of life, and only very limited form of trade exchange happened between the Coalition and the Vespid for quite some time. It took almost a century and few sacred abductions by order of the Ethereals for the best of Coalition scientists to create a helmet which allowed Vespid to actually view other species as sentient. The strange energy which was a mystery, but they did manage to calibrate the helm in such a way that helmet recognized sentient species and helped Vespid to do the same. With that, after decades, finally, first official first contact was established. The concept of the greater good wasn't really clear to the Vespid. No mind control here. The fact of making them view another species as sentient was probably enough of a problem. Vespid minds are simply alien to the point that idea of mind controlling them is, at least for me as a writer, ludicrous. But first, fully peaceful and clear contact was established, and so very long work on a trade and spreading of a concept of a greater good began. Finally, after 122 years since Coalition found the Vespid, they joined Coalition and were given permission to begin colonization of gas giants within Coalition space. Vespid never fully adopted the greater good. Their hive mind-like mindset made concept of division within a hive as very strange. And this might shock you, but despite hive-like mind of the Vespid and insectoid appearance, Vespid don't have queens, nor there's division between Vespids. There are no castes, there are no direct roles between the Vespid. All Vespid are very similar to one another and take on roles which were required for the greater hive to survive. With their hive mind-like connection, they share skill and experience, which means every singular Vespid takes a role which is required of them at the time. It's interesting because you can't view Vespid as individuals. They are collective species, in some way even similar to orcs. The orcs get more powerful the greater their number. The Vespid, it's almost impossible for them to exist without their hive. They must exist within this collective society where they connect to each other, almost like, how to describe it? A web of connection between them, and they work as almost as one organism. Still, every single Vespid has an individual mind, but it's shared with every other member of the hive. It's a paradox in many ways, how someone can be, both hive mind and individual at the same time. And yet, Vespid are exactly that. What Vespid managed to accept from the greater good was the general idea working towards the common good. And Ethereal also accepted that Vespid very biology-made caste system impossibility for them. With understanding on both sides, the true relations was established, and coalition allowed for colonization of numerous gas giants within the coalition space. Those worlds can't really be visited by other species, only high atmosphere space stations can be visited by non-Vespids, so the coalition ability to utilize those worlds is rather limited, and they must rely on Vespid in this matter. As such, sometimes Vespid worlds aren't counted in official tally of worlds due to limitations regarding of visiting them. In many ways, Vespid act like allies of a coalition rather than full members, and that's a reason why sometimes their worlds are and sometimes aren't counted. It's very hard to determine how many Vespid worlds are actually within the coalition space. However, despite this unusual relation, the coalition does get something from it, mostly access to precious and exotic resources that are within gas giants, including the very strange crystals that seem to be very closely connected to the Vespids themselves and are used in their rifles. Those same crystals would prove very important for advancement of technology of the coalition. With coalition's help, Vespid would develop their own vehicles, battlesuits, and even void-capable vessels, specially designed to house Vespid and allow them to utilize their abilities to the greatest extent. In later ages of the coalition, the Vespid would become one of the most numerous and more important members of the coalition, although they usually took neutral stance in internal coalition politics, interest only in growth of their colonies, trade and defense of coalition as a whole, which gave them the greatest ability to grow. They were usually focused on their own people's safety, progress, colonization, and good trade deals with the rest of the coalition. In war, they would prove to be one of the most devastating shock troops, and many enemies of the coalition would learn to fear the sound of Vespid wings. Another interesting species that joined the coalition were Devdas from the Korra, a race of massive, muscular amphibians who were in the middle of a system-wide war when coalition found them. They colonized and terraformed two worlds within their home system, but old empire that did so fell apart into a republic, a fascist-like dictatorships, and remnants of the old empire. This war was stopped thanks to the work of the Watercast and the coalition as a whole. And it was good that they did so, because the Devdas were on the brink of total apocalypse, by using the weapons of mass destructions upon one another. With a lot of diplomatic work and a little bit of militaristic threat, the Devdas reunited into a constitutional monarchy that joined the coalition as a full member species. Although more aggressive in their nature than most members of a coalition, Devdas would prove themselves superior warriors and staunch defenders of the greater good. They would adapt some elements of the caste systems in form of pillars, in which given noble houses would specialize in. Devdas themselves would prove to be great workers among the earth caste and great additions to the fire caste warriors. Their ability to fly vessels in the void and diplomatic skills were rather limited, which isn't surprising as they, almost did destroy one another. In this period of time, Coalition found few other species, but, maybe not species, but worlds that were colonized by species that were already members of a coalition. So, those worlds that were mostly in feral or feudal states were simply annexed by the coalition and brought into the warm embrace of a greater good, in very small and quietly executed conflicts. What is interesting is that those species weren't counted as new members of the coalition. They were simply subjugated, or were fused with already existing members of a coalition. You can't have dissidents among conquered population if they are a minority in the population that already follows the greater good and were part of a force that subjugated them after all. The most important species that was encountered by the coalition in this period, however, were Nagi from Shah-Galut. And despite their small size and lack of limbs, they were leaders of a cluster of systems which counted 9 species of different kinds, including Nagi themselves. They were leading a faction known as 3 Stars Federation, which seemed to be democratic in nature, and even more, the main ideology that was uniting this region of space was very similar to the ideology of a greater good. This federation managed to withstand a few orc attacks that fell on the region of space. They seem to be leading all races as diplomats, and race that spread the concept that was so similar to the greater good. Nagi, in many ways, seemed to be almost a mirror of Ethereals, and Ethereals were initially happy to meet them. After all, from their perspective, ability to unite different species was something which could be considered holy, and the Nagi did just that. With their strength and abilities united, they could accomplish so much more. However, the enthusiasm of the Ethereals was being resisted by the psychic species of the coalition that held them back, sensing that something was terribly wrong. Ethereals, however, were sure that Nagi had pure intentions and established trade relations with them, and by the end of the 40th millennium, they were ready to be admitted as full members of a coalition. Great diplomatic act of a coalition. Joining of a coalition and the Federation. Another faction found among the stars, united with a coalition, consumed by them without a spill of blood. And then a true nature of Nagi was revealed. I'm sure that some of you can already tell what happened, because another 666 years have passed. In the year 998 M40, the third pulse shook the foundations of the entire sector. It was year 6246, era of unity. And when the third pulse happened, it was revealed that Nagi were mind-controlling psyker tyrants who fed on population of subservient 8 species that they had in their faction. The entire Federation, it was a ruse. All people that were in this alliance were nothing more than the cattle for the Nagi. They were directly mind-controlling them, changing their minds so that they could eat them and lay eggs within them. They fed not only on their flesh and bone, but their suffering. The reason why the entire Federation seemed like a utopia that followed the ideas of the greater good was because Nagi fed on the fact how this hope and, well, vision of reality was broken apart. The fear and terror of children, and their flesh especially, was seen as delicacy for them. Especially if it was their parents who kept them down when Nagi fed on them or laid eggs within their flesh. This was revealed to horror of everyone when it was discovered that ethereals and water-caste diplomats that were so optimistic about Nagi joining the coalition were in fact infected by them. Not only that, but thanks to them control, Nagi started spreading their eggs and their own operatives within the coalition. Now, when the pulse happened, this strange anomaly made some of the eggs awaken prematurely, and this secret kept for decades was revealed to the horror of the entire coalition. And of course, a scheme of such magnitude could only be accomplished with the help of none other but the architect of fate, the Tzeentch himself. Just like the first pulse and the hordes of the maddened berserkers were that of Khorne power. The same way that the T'au Empire was corrupted by the visions of perfection by the Dark Prince, the Slaanesh. The Nagi, the psychic tyrants and parasites, were always fervent servants of Tzeentch. But they acted prematurely, and their plans fell apart in their little tentacles. Was it because of nature of the pulse, or their twisted master? It's hard to tell. What is known that the coalition answered with declaration of war. The 7th coalition war, known also as the cleansing of Federation, that lasted exactly 30 years, as every other war that started due to the influence of the Pulse. This one lasted from 998 millennium 40 to year 28 millennium 41, or 6246 to 6282 era of unity. When the 7th Coalition War began, the Nagi occupied 32 worlds, alongside their slaves. After discovery of their scheme and attempt to corrupt Coalition population from within, the Coalition and the Ethereals declared the entire species as, well, incapable of joining the greater good, and the Nagi had to be exterminated, and all species that they took as slaves, as cattle, had to be saved. Coalition declared that Nagi must be exterminated to the last. With Nagi influence and spies already in Coalition, Ethereals gained more and more power to combat their influence. New internal secret police system was established, and members of the Coalition gave up quite a lot of their own power in the name of security and hunting down the Nagi and their puppets. This control wouldn't be fully relinquished by the Ethereals, of course, giving them a constant upper hand within the Coalition. Additionally, with the fact that Nagi were in fact Psykers, Psyker species of the Coalition lost some popularity, and they had to fight really hard to keep their influence from disintegrating completely. Their support in help of locating Nagi and their puppets allowed them to redeem themselves and regain some of their own control, but typical citizen of the Coalition, while technically free, was now almost under constant surveillance, thanks to this war. Nagi, of course, faced against the Coalition, but the war wasn't even a contest. The Federation was far smaller and far weaker than the Coalition at the time, and even though Nagi had millions, if not billions, of slaves that they could throw at the enemy, they weren't soldiers, no commanders. They simply couldn't match the Coalition military might. Nagi were wiped out. The fact that they were using armies of puppets and attempting to spread revolts was more problematic than actual battles. The main worlds of the Federation and their fleets fell within first 4 years of the conflict. 8 years were focused on hunting down every one last Nagi, their eggs and vessels which managed to escape or hide. After 12 brutal years, Nagi were declared mostly extinct, but war was far from over. Out of 32 worlds, 4 were destroyed beyond recovery. Almost a half of remaining worlds were crippled to the point that they couldn't be considered full colonies, but outposts, and they remained as such. Coalition not seeing value in building up worlds that were mostly used as breeding grounds for Nagi sentient cattle to feed upon. The previously puppeted population kept on rebelling and fighting even when all Nagi were killed. Their influence was so deep that even when masters were not but ashes, their orders still forced their slaves to fight. So, by the orders of the Coalition High Council, re-education camps were established on ex-Nagi Empire planets, and population was systematically cured out of Nagi influence. Same happened throughout the Coalition, where Nagi corrupted and took hold in many places. It took 18 long bloody years of constant struggle against re-emerging Nagi puppets, some attempting to revive the now extinct species through cultist behavior or even by saving few eggs of the cursed monsters and doing their best to ensure that they would hatch and grow into their new masters. This was also the very first war that managed to reach the T'au homeworld directly since the unification of the species. A small portion of local population going mad due to corrupting influence and causing a small amount of damage, but it was a massive hit to Coalition's morale. The T'au was free from the horrors of war for thousands of years till that point. Nagi broke that cycle, and for that they were despised. The hard work to ensure that all who were infected will be cured was put in motion throughout the Coalition. And with changes to the security, especially internal security, the secret police was established, guarding watchers of a greater good, Gadi Tauva Ki, also known as GTK. This organization gained more and more power and influence due to the incident with Nagi corruption on the T'au homeworld, and they were determined to hunt down all corrupted rebels to the last. As I said before, this process took painful 18 Terran years, with numerous uprisings and revolts, keeping official war going until it came to an end in the 13th year, when last of the puppets cultists were eliminated. The Coalition scientists managed to cure some of the infected to a point, but even with all their best efforts, the older generation would remain haunted by their actions, or wouldn't be able to resist outside influence too much. You must understand that with the feeding process that Nagi enjoyed so much, the Nagi weren't that different from Drukhari. They fed on suffering, on despair, on flesh and bone, and so they mind-controlled people, forcing them to do terrible things while their mind was still independent in a way, so they could feed on their suffering. Then they would force those memories down, bring those persons back to the light of this utopia they created, only to repeat this process and feed on their suffering again and again. The older population remembered how the children that they believed were lost in accidents were in fact killed by their own hands, as they held them in place when the Nagi fed on them, their own children. And the Coalition tried their best, but those wounds were more than just physical or psychological. They were partly psychic in nature. They couldn't be healed in any way, shape or form, no matter what the coalition tried. At least that's the official version. Some say that it was intended a move by the Ethereals. After all, the new young generation was saved and raised, but not by their own parents, but mostly by the T'au and Coalition specialists, who took care of traumatized children who, now free from Nagi influence, couldn't trust parents who fed their siblings to their now dead masters. And so, those youngsters adopted the T'au castes system and ideas of a greater good very quickly, which allowed for quick integration of entire region without additional problems. The influence and trauma of old generation was transformed into regional version of faith in the greater good. T'au, and especially Ethereals, as liberators from broken chains, were seen as almost saintly figures. Soon, an entire region that once was the Free Star Federation became a heart of religious cults of the greater good. After victory in the 7th Coalition War and short period of reconstruction, it was decided that the expansion should stop as well. With a lot of ground gained and brutal war won, it was time to put some reforms and begin another age of security. And of course, age of security had need of guardians. And so, the GTK, Guarding Watchers of a Greater Good, were fully recognized and integrated into the coalition after the war. In future eras, with Ethereals becoming more and more dogmatic with their ideas of how greater good should be adopted and how caste system should be interpreted, they would become a potent tool of control and punishment. And while T'au society itself wouldn't need much of their presence, they would be essential tool of control among the member species of the coalition. It was due to the desire of growing power of this institution that the barriers and limitation on between any given caste grew to the point that in the 41st millennium, rows of different castes couldn't in any way, shape or form overlap. Vashya, venturing between the spheres, a term used when a member of one caste ventures into the sphere of skills of a different caste. Once it was just a statement, but in the future it would become a taboo, and GTK will be there to enforce the punishment by the will of Ethereals, of course. As I said, the 4th sphere of expansion saw a great deal of worlds secured by the coalition, and 7 septs were established in this period of time. The first Sept was Siyun, established where Sitorians once lived, where the T'au Empire once dominated the stars. It was a core Sept world built to help the recolonization of now cleansed worlds. People of this Sept are more wary and many times more cruel to the enemies of a greater good and the coalition than others. The fact that they are walking on the worlds that once belonged to the monsters that were such great threat to a coalition is a potent reminder of their duty to the greater good and the price that others must pay if they stand against it. Next Sept is V. Citra, Sept world established near Vespid homeworld to help coordinate their efforts of integration, and it became very important industrial world using supplies of strange Vespid crystals to advance coalition technology. The Sept became more important in the future in matter of supporting Vespid shipyards and their colonization effort throughout the coalition. Hero Let, Sept world established near Devda's homeworld. It became an university and research Sept, one studying the Damocles Rift and possible paths on the other side of it. And it was researchers of this exact Sept that managed to find the way to the other side of the Damocles Rift to help to expand the coalition to the other side. Pirosh was established on the other side of the Perdus Rift with the expansion of the crude space. It became mostly a trading and industrial world where trading vessels would pass through in the future. It became very important naval installation. This Sept supported a number of military outposts and hunting outposts for the sake of trading and ability to hunt for the crude. Triyan was established near the Beast's Eye, tasked with control and possible extermination of all local orc population. Triyan in many ways was responsible for keeping an eye on this region of space and orc population within it. It became a major military and naval installation, one specialized with dealing with orcs. T'au Shia was established within old Federation space to secure and coordinate conquered territories. Administration world first and foremost, one with many spies, schools and research centers which kept on studying influence of Nagi on population of infected species. Unofficially, it became a capital of a coalition secret police, excluding the T'au homeworld itself, of course. Leia, Sept where re-education camps were established to free races from influence of Nagi. Zoats and other psychic races used this Sept to support the spread of religion in this region of space. In secret, this Sept was tasked with figuring out how to conquer psychic influence and how to eliminate psykers, as ethereals started to fear the influence of a psychic species within the coalition. A great secret indeed, how to defeat your own allies, hidden behind the curtain of, well, we need to figure out how to fight potential new psychic foes, is it not? By the end of this period, the coalition possessed 48 member species, 576 worlds, including 127 outposts, and 43 septs. Now, a part of me wants to end the episode right here, but I can't. For one single reason. The second age of security is, well, a really uneventful period. And what happened after it is full of very complex events. So, if I want to keep the story cohesive, I need to tell you more. So, let's jump into the second age of security, into the 41st millennium. Yes, my darlings, we are finally here. So close to the moment when the Coalition and the Imperium meet. The 41st millennium from the T'au calendar lasted from 6249 to 7475, era of unity. And the start was quite promising. After all, Coalition now possessed over 500 worlds. Sure, a good portion of them were outposts that had barely any population and barely anything produced on most of them, but still, they reached a great size. They were mighty and powerful, with numerous species as their members, ready to stand shoulder to shoulder against the horrors of the galaxy. Yet, initial 742 years of great progress and continuous expansion would be tempered by the Damocles Gulf Crusade. That's the most important event of this period of time. In fact, it was the most important event of 8th millennium from the T'au perspective. But we are now in the period before the Damocles Gulf Crusade. A period that lasted exactly 850 T'au years, and started with the second age of security. The second age of security lasted from 45th year of Millennium 41 all the way to 368th year Millennium 41. In T'au calendar is 6304 to 6700 era of unity. This period was a time of technological progress. The advancement in technology were faster than many people expected. The very start of the second age of security saw the development of the second generation Ether-Com system. Second generation Ether-Com system developed 1375 Terran years or 1685 T'au years since the development of the first generation of Ether-Com system, achieved thanks to hard work of Earthcast and successful utilization of Vespid crystals that turned out to be very important for upgrading this system. Developed at the start of the 41st millennium, it has proven to be a significant upgrade in comparison to the previous generation. Not only the range of the Ether-Com system became greater, the second version became ship deployable. It still needed a dedicated, specialized vessel, one that was rather of a big size, but that was a small price to pay for the sake of FTL communication for fleets. A great advancement that was thought unattainable. Before, only psychic choirs had ability to be placed within vessels and used to direct communications on long range. Ethercom relay system had to be placed on the space stations to work properly, but the second generation of Ethercom system could be placed within void-capable vessels. What's, however, more important is that a smaller version was successfully developed. Those, however, were designed to allow instant communication within a star system. However, due to different wavelengths used in those systems, the miniature version couldn't contact bigger stations and the other way around. Just so that nobody freaks out, those miniature versions were beyond expensive. We are talking that those machines, those communication systems were usually only in the hands of ethereals and only those of core Sept worlds within the T'au space. Not coalition space, T'au space. We are talking about how rare they were. To be given this technology to any other caste, to any other member of any other caste, hell, different species than the T'au, was unheard of. Like, this is one of the greatest honors, to be given a set of those comm systems that could help for communication within a given star system, with instant communication. Extremely rare, beyond expensive, and mostly something that the Earth caste made just to prove that they could, rather than to be utilized properly within any range of, being useful. Because sure, this equipment is very useful in many ways, but the price of it means that it's better to lose a freaking frigate or two than to damage one of those bloody mechanisms. However, this miniature version and the advancement made to help create this magnificent device helped a lot with improving communication in system either way, to the point that communication and coordination within star systems of the coalition was boosted to great extent. So-called tight beam relays became far more popular and cheaper compared to the previous eras, thanks to creation of this miniature version of Ether relay system. And with that, coordination within systems and communication overall within the range of a singular star system became far more effective. Of course, there were many other technological marvels accomplished in that period of time, although eclipsed by the creation of second generation Ethercom relay. For example, it was in this period that Coalition managed to create first versions of long-range ion cannons. Although primitive compared to their later cousins, they were first step on advancement of ion technology within the coalition. It was also a period when the coalition created courier drones, finally managing to compact ether drive to the point where the weaker versions, the older generations of the drive, could be put in torpedo-like messenger drone if need be. A very important advancement in situation of conflict, war, and with creation of new colonies, where ether-com relay couldn't be established beforehand. The ether drive itself wasn't really faster, but the Earthcast managed to compact the design overall throughout all generations, that allowed them to be put in smaller vessels if it was deemed necessary. The void constructs became bigger and more efficient, to the point that Earthcast was confident enough to create artificial worlds, something which before was beyond imagination. Even mega constructs appeared around the coalition, boosting the production and place to live in more and more. This progress was connected with the first successful creation of iridium, far superior and tougher material compared to usually used alloys by the T'au. Initially it was created to help construct very precise and very important parts of machinery, but in the future the iridium would be used to help armor up the different battlesuits of the Firecast. However, this era saw one of the greatest achievements of the Earthcast in the entire coalition history, one that was almost on the same level as the second generation of the ether-com relay, if not even greater. It was creation of fully artificial moon-size space station that became a Sept world, one that had a potential of becoming a mobile Sept in the future, although the secrets how to push and transport vessel of such size through the ether was beyond the Earthcast at the time. Alongside the creation of artificial Sept, Coalition created first planetary shield, a protective bubble of energy that protected entire world. The very first of such devices was deployed on Trian to counter the orc attacks. For thousands of years, the energy shields of the Earthcast could protect cities and important installations, but not entire planets. Now it became possible, extremely expensive and costly in continuous energy that had to be supplied, but feasible. And so the energy shields that could protect entire planets started to appear on some of the Sept worlds, although they were extremely rare, to a point that one could say that there were more examples of micro or mini ether-com relays in the hands of the ethereals than planetary shields in the coalition. So you could probably guess that to describe them as rare would be understatement of a few millennia at least. This age of security brought a lot of internal changes. The GTK, Guarding Watchers of the Greater Good, grew in power, and the ethereals became more and more dogmatic. As I said before, other species, especially psychic species, were slowly losing their influence, and the general knowledge of psychic power was getting more and more limited to the masses. The knowledge of the psychic energy, the mind science as it started to be called, was getting limited and limited, both in knowledge and in use. And as I mentioned, Vashya, the blending of a caste venturing between the spheres, became true taboo and criminalized throughout the coalition for the T'au and the species that fully adopted the caste system of the T'au. In previous ages, it wasn't weird to see Earth caste taking roles of combat engineers or combat medics. Now, this was lost and replaced by the medic or engineering drones, still controlled by the Earth caste, but they wouldn't be directly placed in the harm's way. The same way Fire caste couldn't train to be engineers, combat engineers or combat medics, again leaving this task to the drones. By the time of Damocles' Gulf Crusade, Vashya wasn't simply a crime, but it was ingrained taboo within the T'au society. The memory of the fact that once Vashya was just a statement of fact that wasn't criminalized, only frowned upon, was long forgotten by then. It's amazing what few centuries can do to a society. It was all connected to the rise of powerful faction of the Ethereals that were calling themselves Puritans. There were rival factions to their power, not only of different species, but also of different Ethereals, such like moderates in the different regions of the coalition. Some even accused the Puritans to be, the next evolution of old supremacist faction of the T'au, known from the 5th Coalition War, one that caused so much damage to the coalition itself. It is interesting to note that on the other side of the Perdos Rift, in Crute space and around it, the faction of Puritans had very weak influence. Here, the moderate faction, the cooperation faction as they call themselves, created by Aun Sai, still held strong, and what became the fortress of this version of a greater good for centuries to come. The second age of security saw far smaller scale of colonization in terms of proper colonies, as a lot of resources was dedicated to creation of first fully artificial Sept, but some Septs were created either way. So I was teasing about it for quite some time now, so let's talk about it. The T'au fully artificial moon-size Sept. A far echo of Ethereal's dreams of creating a new mobile capital after discovering the light sphere within the Crampageddon. After 1,860 T'au years since the discovery of the light sphere in captured Space Hulk, this dream became reality. The creation of this Sept took basically entirety of the second age of security, becoming active by its very end. And while some might say that the creation of this station was rather fast, it's important to note that first prototypes and plans were created over 1000 T'au years before the start of the proper construction. The Earth caste spent over 1000 years attempting to make the dreams of the ethereals true. And despite wars and destruction that raged throughout those ages, they managed to do so. At the moment of the creation, the T'au couldn't move faster than light. Although Earthcast made sure to leave space for engines, with a vision of allowing this massive construct to become mobile. At the moment of official opening, it only had ability of sublight travel at best. The ether drive that was planned to be placed within turned out to be faulty, and the entire design had to be remade from ground up. The ethereals were, of course, displeased by this failure, but all numbers add up. With a lot of work, T'au would be able to move faster than light. The new drive would be needed to be far more powerful and more efficient, with the fuel to move properly, good distance, but with time, it would become possible. The T'au was established in the previously unexploited region along the Perdus Rift, near the Mekian space. The artificial Sept was to feed on resources of the entire region, and by the time those resources would run out, the Sept would become mobile and could move to another region, so it could be exploited. Another Sept that was created was Oda Han. It was to support T'au in containing the orcs in the region, who were getting more active while Coalition was expanding into their region of space. This Sept was put on the other side of the Beast's Eye anomaly. When T'au was focusing not only on the Beast's Eye but also the Beast's Teeth, Oda Han focused on the Beast's Eye and the Beast's Bay. Those two Septs became specialists in dealing with orcs, both their ground and naval forces well trained in the art of fighting those monsters. The both Septs established a singular goal for themselves: to fully cleanse the orc menace from the Beast's Eye and take it for the Coalition. The last Sept established in this period of time was God-Ar, a Sept established between the old T'au Empire and Vespid homeworld, intended to be a main base for future expansions in that direction, as well as a fortress Sept guarding the main navigable stellar path from the south, from which direction orcs arrived during the Fifth Coalition War. This fortress guarded not only the navigable path, but also the devastated region of T'au Empire and the borders of old Osten-Sea Council, so that in case of invasion, this region of space wouldn't be open to the enemies. By the end of Second Age of Security, Coalition possessed 48 member species, 624 worlds, with 456 colonies and 168 outposts, and 46 Sept worlds. The coalition grew in power even more, and they were ready to start another sphere of expansion. But that's a story for another time. So my darlings, that's it for today. The entirety of the fourth sphere of expansion and the second age of security. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, the whole shtick. If you have any questions, leave them below. I will do my best to answer them the best I can. In the next episode, as you could probably guess, we are moving to the fifth sphere of expansion, and with that, to a final period before the Damocles Gulf Crusade. As you probably noticed, I try to speed things along a little bit because I want to finish this Reimagined series before the end of the year. Hell, if I make few longer episodes like this one, I might be ready or finished before the Christmas. It will be quite a lot of work, but hell, I am motivated to try doing so. But we shall see. This last week was hard for me. I got really sick. I was laying in bed the entire week and I did barely any work. I am recording this by the end of the week, when I prefer recording things for a few days to give myself more time for doing other things. But this time I had to put everything in few hours and doing my best. So if the quality of the video fell down a little bit, I apologize. I am quite busy and I try my best to keep the schedule of one video per week for you to enjoy. I am shocked how much I already managed to record and how little we are to the end. Bloody hell, this last stretch of episodes will be fun. I prepared a lot of cool conflicts for you to enjoy. But that's not a story for today. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope you enjoyed. Now, my dear listeners, remember, wherever you are, whatever you do, try to enjoy yourself while you can. I wish you most critical day. Ta-ta!